Good morning, everyone. Happy Sunday to you. Glad that you chose to join us for our Sunday stream today. If it's your first time joining, my name is Brody. I'm the pastor here, and it is my privilege to welcome you to this kind of dreary Sunday, but it's only dreary outside. It makes me glad that you are with us here. If you've been with us before, you know how this works. We've got some time of music. We've got a lesson in the life of Joseph this morning. And we've got the chat wide open and ready for you to be able to chat with friends, answer questions, share your thoughts. So please, if you're here with us already, drop a hello so that I know you're here, so that I can interact with you, and so that Nat and Rachel and I know that we aren't alone in this endeavor this Sunday morning. But we're glad that you're here with us. I'm going to pray as we get going, and then I'm going to hand it over to Rachel to lead us in a song to orient our mind and focus us on God as we come together today. So pray with me from home. Lord Jesus, thank you so much that you have made today. God, you are watering the earth right now. And we're just so thankful that we get to come into your presence, that we get to come together, and that we get to hear from your word. I pray that you would show us how much you love us, what you've equipped us for, the good work that you put out before us. As we look into Joseph's life, God, help us see parts of ourselves, and ultimately help us see more of you. I pray that you would open our eyes, our minds, and our ears this morning, and I pray this all in your name. Amen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel, and this is King of My Heart. Let the King of my heart be the fountain right. Let the King of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he is my song. 'Cause you are good, 'cause you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. 'Cause you are good, good. Oh, 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 you're never gonna let me down. 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 'Cause you are good, good. Oh, 'cause you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, 'cause you are good, good.
Thanks, Rachel. I love getting to sing about how good God is and the fact that He will never let us down. His faithfulness goes on forever. It's interesting when we think about God's faithfulness. With God being faithful, we can often associate that with some of the dreams or aspirations that we have in life. So as we move into this time of talking about Joseph and his life, I'd like to ask you, what are some of your dreams? What are some of your aspirations? What are some of your future hopes and plans that you hope won't let you down? Maybe if you're a grad and you're watching right now, you've got a school plan that you're going into, or maybe if you're in grade 11, that's the same. But there could be a bunch of other things. Maybe you want to be someone when you grow up, or you want to achieve something with your life, or there's something you've planted in your mind, a dream or a hope or a goal. I would love to hear in the chat what your goal is. Because God is always at work, and it can be easy for us to focus so much on a goal and miss maybe what God is doing in the meantime, but we can also give God our goals as we work toward them. Today, we are going, and I'm going to come back to the chat to see what you guys write in a second, but I'm going to keep going. Today, we're looking at Genesis 40 and 41, where we are going to see Joseph and a few people who have been having dreams. Different dreams from what we're talking about right now, right? The dreams that I just asked for you to put in the chat, that's aspirations and goals. We're actually going to look at Joseph interpreting real dreams that people dreamt while they were sleeping. And we're going to see through the next couple of chapters that God equips his people to do the work that he sets out for us to do. That's kind of the main idea of today's talk, that God equips his people to do the work that he sets out for us to do. So again, we're looking at Genesis 40 and 41. We're not going to read the entire 2 chapters because that would be far too long for this quick morning. But I encourage you, once we're done here, take a glance through, read the chapters again, and see how God is equipping Joseph, and see how God might be equipping you as you also think about your dreams and the people around you. So here's Genesis 40, starting in verse 1. Sometime after this, the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and his baker committed an offense against their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry with his 2 officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard appointed Joseph to be with them, and he attended them. They continued for some time in custody. So we're meeting a couple of new characters today. We meet the chief cupbearer and we meet the chief baker. These 2 would have been super important in Pharaoh's royal collection of servants and officers because they would have been responsible literally for the food that Pharaoh ate. So if you're trying to poison the king, you'd have to get past the cupbearer and the baker. These guys were super, super important. But they'd obviously done something to upset Pharaoh, who was the king of Egypt. We see both titles put in here. And we're actually going to be meeting Pharaoh later on in today's message as well. But Pharaoh's mad at them, so he throws them in prison. We find out that they end up in the same prison where Joseph is serving. Not sure if there were multiple prisons in Egypt, but whatever the case, Pharaoh put them into this prison. Joseph is here serving as a prisoner, but he's serving within the prison. God has given him favor, not only in Potiphar's house that we read in last chapter, chapter 39. If you missed that, you can check back in our streams on this channel. But now he is serving inside the prison. So we see the first point under how God equips his people, we see that God equips his people to serve others, even those who have wronged us. Joseph was in prison for an offense that he didn't commit. I just asked you guys about your dreams and what your aspirations are. This was probably not Joseph's big goal in life, to end up in prison in a faraway nation, far from family, for something that he didn't commit. Joseph's dreams weren't quite panning out. But Joseph still trusted that God was faithful. He believed that God would never let him down, just like we sang just now. So he chose not to give in to despair, but to trust that God was at work in him. And so he served others, even those who wronged him. So Joseph is in this prison. The cupbearer and the baker, they come to the prison as well, and they spend some time together. We don't know how long they were in prison. We know that Joseph was sold into slavery when he was 17, and we're going to find out later in today's message that Joseph gets out of prison when he's 30. So there's 13 years there, maybe 12, 13 years of time where he served in Potiphar's house and where he served in prison. Whatever the case, at some point, these two high-ranking officials came in, and they spent some time together. Joseph got to know them. And then we find out in the next verses that one night they both had very significant dreams. I'd like to ask another question. Ooh, I see one from Eunice. My dream is to be a pediatric nurse one day. That is a very honorable dream, Eunice. Thanks for sharing. Appreciate that. Another question for you. If you'd still like to answer that first question, what are your dreams or aspirations? You can do that. But I would also like to know, when you are sleeping and you're dreaming, do you remember your dreams? Do you have really vivid, really powerful dreams? Or do you wake up and they're gone just in a second? If you have a dream that you remember, I'd also love to hear that. They tend to be crazy. I still have dreams that I remember from when I was 6 years old. There's one dream that's just implanted in my brain. It's a dumb dream. It was like I was on some big water slides, and I had to pick which water slide to go down. And if I went down the right one, I got to a pool of water. And if I went down the wrong one, I got eaten by a crocodile. And I don't know why I remember that. I don't even know why I dreamed it. But it's burned into my brain. Dreams can be really powerful things. I don't think that one has any meaning. But in today's story, we find out that these two had dreams that had very, very significant meaning. God was doing something. And he put Joseph in this situation so that he could be used by God, so that he could be equipped by God to serve others. And this also brings us to the second sort of sub-point that I want to share with you, is that God equips his people to actually see other people. That might sound like a strange statement to make, that God lets us see people. But what we notice is in verse 5 and 6, we see that they had their dreams. And in verse 6, it says, when Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were troubled. So Joseph knew what these two guys were like. He knew what their personalities were like. They'd spent enough time that he could, he was familiar with them. But Joseph was also soft enough to be aware that their mood had changed. Sometimes that's easy. If you have a bad day, it's pretty easy to just be on edge or to be irritated or whatnot. But sometimes it's a little harder. We try to hide our feelings. Maybe we try to hide our emotions. I watched a movie last night that made me super sad, and I wanted to cry, but I didn't. And I don't know if I was trying to hide my emotion from my family or if I just didn't want to cry last night, but I kept it in. Whatever the case with these dreamers, Joseph noticed that something wasn't right. So he asks them about their dreams. I see Jordan says he doesn't usually remember his dreams. Maddie remembers a dream when she ate like 12 cakes for some reason. That's a good dream. Well done, Maddie. So these dreamers, the baker and the chief cupbearer, they remembered their dreams when they woke up. They were shaken by the dreams. And Joseph says, tell me your dreams, and God is going to interpret them for you. He's given me this gift, and I want to use it for you. So we find out that the cupbearer, he goes first. He dreamt, this is in verse 9 and going forward. He dreamt that there were vines, and on the vine there were 3 branches, and there were grapes all over these branches. And he took the grapes, and he squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and gave the cup to Pharaoh. And Joseph says, this dream means that in 3 days, Pharaoh is going to restore you to be his cupbearer again. Remember, we don't know how long they were in prison, but whatever the case, Joseph was saying, there's good news. Pharaoh is going to put you back in your position. He's going to free you from prison, and he's going to let you continue serving him. And then Joseph tacks on at the end, when you are serving Pharaoh, remember me here, because I've been imprisoned for something I didn't do. I'm a slave from a faraway nation, and I would like to be freed from this place. So please tell Pharaoh about me. And the cupbearer thought this was good news, right? As anyone would. Oh, there's hope now. I'm not just sitting here rotting away and wasting my days. There's actually hope for me. And so the baker says the baker saw that the news was good. This is in verse 16 now. And so he also shared his dream with Joseph. He says, I was walking, and I had on my head 3 baskets, and in the top one there was bread. But the crows and the birds were coming and eating the bread out of the basket. What does this mean? And Joseph says, again, the 3 baskets are 3 days. And in the cupbearer's story, Pharaoh raised him up and reinstated him. But unfortunately for you, in 3 days, Pharaoh's going to raise you up and kill you. And that's bad news. I don't think I'd want to sit there for 3 days thinking, what's going to happen to me? I think actually I'd get kind of upset for those 3 days. I wouldn't want to talk to Joseph anymore. And the cupbearer's all like, oh, I'm going to be free real soon. This is so good. And the baker's just, probably wanting to forget what Joseph said. But whatever the case, whatever they were feeling, 3 days passed. And on that 3rd day, both of them were released. The cupbearer went and served Pharaoh again. And we find out actually it was Pharaoh's birthday, so happy birthday, Pharaoh. But the cupbearer got reinstated, and the baker was killed. So what Joseph had interpreted came to pass. God had equipped Joseph for this moment. He had equipped Joseph to be able to serve these 2. Even though it didn't turn out so well for the baker, God was still with Joseph, even while he was serving in this prison. Now, this is different from something like deja vu. If you've ever experienced deja vu, it's a weird feeling where you're like in a moment and you think, I've seen this before. I was just talking with a friend yesterday who said that she was having deja vu of telling us that she was experiencing deja vu in that moment, which is some kind of Inception moment. Nat was just telling me earlier today that he just watched Inception last night. Dreams are weird. Deja vu is weird too, but this is not a case of deja vu. This is a case of God miraculously stepping in and taking a real dream someone had, first giving them that dream to give them a message, and then also having someone interpret that dream for them so that they could have an understanding of what was to come. And so we move forward. We see at the very end of chapter 40, remember, Joseph wanted to get out of prison, and the cupbearer was reinstated. But it says in verse 23, yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. So even after this good thing happened for the cupbearer, he forgot about Joseph. And we find out in the next verse, in 41, verse 1, after 2 whole years, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing by the Nile. And we meet Pharaoh, we get into Pharaoh's dreams, but we find out that it took 2 more years between the cupbearer being freed and Joseph actually coming into Pharaoh's presence, which is what this next chapter is about. So Joseph had this glimmer of hope. He had this moment where he thought, okay, this is my chance to get into Pharaoh's good books, to get out of here. And then it was gone again. And he waited for 2 whole years. Joseph's whole 20s were lost to slavery and to prison. And right now, you might feel like you're losing time because of the pandemic, because you can't see friends, because plans aren't working out the way that we had hoped. We miss you here at Willingdon, that's for sure. But there's so much that we can feel that we're missing in life because we're stuck with all the restrictions and everything. What we're going to see in Joseph's life is that God wasn't actually letting these things go to waste. We already see that Joseph was faithful to God during this time. But God was doing work. He was setting things up, even though Joseph maybe didn't see all of the details. I can't imagine that every day in those 2 years that Joseph was on top of the world. But he still trusted that God was the one at work. So we keep going. A lot of chapter 41 is Pharaoh's dream. This is important because this is Joseph's ticket out of here. We're going to see that in a second. But Pharaoh dreams that he's on the Nile River, and he sees 7 good cows come up out of the Nile. And then he sees 7 bad cows come up, and they eat the good cows, and he wakes up. And he's like, that's a weird dream. Okay, whatever, I guess I'll go try sleep again. So he goes back to sleep. And he dreams again. He dreams of 7 great heads of corn that come up and spring up, full of life. They look good. They're delicious. But then all of a sudden, 7 withered and gnarly heads of corn that are rotten come up, and they take out the good corn. And Pharaoh wakes up with a start. And it says in the morning, Pharaoh was troubled by this dream, and no one could understand what the dream was all about. God was giving Pharaoh a message. Just like 2 years ago with the baker and with the cupbearer, God was telling Pharaoh something, but no one understood what was going on. And so it's at this point in time, we're looking at 41 verse 9 now. At this point in time, the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, I remember my offenses today. When Pharaoh was angry with his servants and put me and the chief baker in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, we dreamed on the same night, he and I, each having a dream with its own interpretation. A young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. When we told him, he interpreted our dreams, giving an interpretation to each man according to his dream, and as he interpreted to us, so it came about. I was restored to my office, and the baker was hanged. So Pharaoh has this dream, and the cupbearer, hearing the dream, says, oh, I know someone. I know a guy for you. You need to meet Joseph. You need to tell Joseph your dream because he can interpret dreams. So Joseph is cleaned up. He comes before Pharaoh. And notice the wording in verse 14. It says, Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they quickly brought him out of the pit. It's interesting that they call the prison the pit, which they did earlier as well. But Joseph continually has these pit moments. First, he's thrown into a pit by his brothers, and then he's raised out of the pit and sent off to serve in Egypt, but as a slave. Now, he's in the pit of prison, and he's brought out to serve Egypt, but instead we're going to find out that he's going to serve Egypt almost as a king. So God is lining these moments up for him, but there's this rhythm that Joseph is learning faithfulness, he's learning submission, and he's learning through these times of hardship that God is always with him and equipping him. And so Pharaoh shares his dream, and he thinks that Joseph is going to be able to help him. But in verse 16, we see that Joseph answered Pharaoh, It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. Joseph knew that God was the one at work. So he brings glory to God, which he did earlier as well with the baker and the cupbearer. And so another point for you is this, that God equips his people to glorify his name. The whole point of following God is to make him known, to share the goodness of God with others, to promote who God is, what God is doing, what God has done, especially the good news that God has made a way through Jesus for us to come back to him, to experience fullness of life, to experience the goodness that can only come from a God who loves us, who created us, who knows us. So God equips his people to glorify his name. And that's what Joseph does here. He interprets Pharaoh's dream for him. He actually says, Pharaoh, your two dreams that you dreamt, they're actually the same dream. God is doing something here. And because you dreamed it twice, you can be sure that God is going to do this soon and that nothing can change his mind. He says there's going to be 7 really, really good years of lots of food, of lots of produce. And then there's going to be 7 really, really bad years where there will be nothing growing in all of the land. This is the interpretation that Joseph gives. And so Joseph also says, you need to hire a wise person, to have a plan, to make sure that Egypt survives through these bad years. Joseph, a prisoner at this point, gives the king advice, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. And this might be the first time that Joseph has ever seen Pharaoh. But he says, here's what you need to do, king. Hire someone so that during the good years, you can take extra, you can store it away, so that in the bad years, you can sell the grain back to Egypt and save the nation. And miraculously, Pharaoh looks around and he says, who is wiser than this man? This man has the Spirit of God. This pagan king, Pharaoh, he could tell that God was doing something in Joseph. He might not have worshipped the same God. He might not have even understood what God was doing. But he could tell that Joseph's God was different. And when we live our lives on display, bringing glory to God, people will notice that we're living differently, that we have different hopes, that we have different dreams even, that we have different priorities. And if we're living for God's glory, it's going to direct people back to him. So Pharaoh puts Joseph as the man in charge, and Joseph spends 7 years collecting extra grain. And there's so much grain that he doesn't even keep track of it after a while. There's just too much to keep track of. And Pharaoh also gives him a wife, an Egyptian woman named Asenath. And Asenath and Joseph have 2 kids. Their names are Manasseh and Ephraim. These are important names because we actually find out in the text that Manasseh it sounds like the Hebrew word to forget. Joseph has forgotten the hardships that he went through. He's forgotten the life with his brothers because he's been given so much by God here in Egypt. And Ephraim, Ephraim sounds like the Hebrew word for twice fruitful, a second child. God is blessing him. God is confirming this promise that he is always with Joseph. We might not always see the outworking of our faithfulness to God. It's not about God repaying us. Sometimes people through history have been faithful to God and they've died before seeing what God is doing. But God is always faithful to his people. And here we get a very visual picture of this family that God has now given to Joseph. And then after the 7 years go by, the bad years come in, and there's no food. But in Egypt, Joseph has stored up so much food that God is going to use him to save the nation. God equips his people to actually reach out and save others. Not that I'm able to save someone from death or from, whatever hardship they might be in, but God puts us into relationship with people to offer those lifelines, to offer support and encouragement, and to ultimately direct people to the hope that we have in God, the hope that we have in Jesus. I get to share that with people as one of God's people. So all this is happening. There's a famine now in the land. But Joseph, having trusted God all of these 12 years in prison and in servitude, he is now experiencing a fruitfulness even in the midst of this famine. God equips his people to be fruitful in the midst of famine. You might feel today and this week and this year like you are in the middle of a famine. Maybe not physically, maybe physically, maybe you need help. If you do, if your family needs help, you can reach out to us. We would love to support you and be able to connect with you and offer you help. But maybe it's more emotional or spiritual or intellectual. Maybe you're just feeling drained or worn out or like there isn't an end to whatever's happening in your life. God sees you. God knows what's going on. And God is able to step in, bring a family around you, a family of believers, a family of friends and family and help. And you can experience growth right now. You can experience freedom. You can experience a depth of relationship that can only come from knowing the God who has created you and being united with a family of other believers who also share the same God. You, in the midst of whatever hardship you're experiencing, can know that God is faithful through and through. Just as we sang earlier, that God will never let us down. As the King of our heart, he is watching over you. So in the midst of famine, you can be fruitful. Joseph was fruitful in the midst of famine. Joseph was serving others. We see in Joseph's life, all of this stuff is going on, but he held tight to the promise of God. And ultimately, the life of Joseph points us to the life of Jesus. We see Jesus seeing people where they're at, broken and hurting and in need, and coming down to serve them. We see Jesus pointing people back to the Father always, glorifying his name. We see Jesus, through his death on the cross, saving all nations who would come to him, even the people who hated him. And so the life of Joseph really points us toward the fulfillment of Jesus, that Jesus ultimately is the one through whom we are equipped. Romans 5, verse 8 says, God showed his love for us in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Even though we were running away from God, Jesus gave up his life to bring us back to God. And when we put our faith, our trust in Jesus, then we can be equipped to do the good works that God has set out for us to do. Jesus allows us to see others, to meet them where they're at, to serve them no matter who they are. Jesus makes us fruitful. He grows the fruit of the Spirit in us, even in the midst of times of famine. Jesus ultimately points us to bring glory to God's name no matter where we are. So, for you, do you have people in your life that you can share good news with? Are you in need of the good news today? I hope that as we've talked about Joseph, as we've talked about his serving and his trust in God, that you can see that God is faithful. And as we move into the spring and the summertime, my hope is that you also will experience God's faithfulness, that you also will know his good gifts, that you also will see how much he loves you and the freedom that we have in Jesus. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Rachel, who's going to lead us in another song of reflection. I just invite you to reflect. And if you want to spend this time praying, go for it. But I'll turn it over to Rachel now.
Hi, everyone. Before I sing this song, I just want to kind of explain a little bit on why I chose it. Brody texted me a couple days ago saying that he was going to talk about Joseph and how God brought him out of this place and about his dreams. So I chose the song No Longer Slaves because it talks about how we're no longer slaves to fear. As a person who deals with a lot of fears and anxieties and worry, sometimes it's hard to let go of those fears. And the same with Joseph. During those years, he probably was really scared. But yet how we're no longer slaves to anyone but or any feelings, but we're God's children. So, yeah. Got a pig here. Okay. You unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies till all my fears are gone. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I've been born again to a family. Your blood runs through my veins. Sorry, that was the wrong verse. From my mother's womb, you've chosen me. Your blood runs through my veins. I've been born again to a family. split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears are drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and sing. I am a child of God. I am a child of God. I am a child of God.
Thanks, Rachel. It's such a good reminder that we are children of God. When we've trusted our lives to Jesus, He is always faithful. And as a good father, He is always looking out for us. Joseph knew that. He knew it differently from us, obviously, because he came before Jesus. But now that we've seen Jesus, now that we have heard the good news, we can trust Him no matter what's going on. And so as you enter school this week, or as you go into work this week, my prayer is that you remember that you are a child of God. And if you're not yet part of the family and you want to be, I encourage you to either send me a note, I'd love to chat, or reach out to a friend that you know believes in Jesus and follows after Him, because we want you to experience this fullness of life that is available in God. One announcement, real quick, just I popped into the chat. If you've got any questions, you can let me know. I'd be happy to address those before we go today. But just wanted to let you know that next week there will be no live stream. There will be no Sunday stream, unfortunately, on the first week end of May. So if you pop in, you'll just have to catch up on some other videos on the channel that you haven't seen yet. But there will be no Sunday stream 1 week from now. We will be back later in May. Keep your eyes peeled on both the YouTube channel, subscribe if you're not, and also make sure that you're following us on our Instagram page, Willingdon Senior High. That's Willingdon, SRHIGH. We post updates there all the time so you can always know what's going on. Just looking again at the chat, not seeing any questions come through today. A little bit of a quieter morning, and that's all right. We're going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much for being with us. I look forward to seeing you again soon. And again, make sure that you're subscribed and following us on Instagram so you never miss a thing here at Willingdon Senior High. Take care. Have a wonderful Sunday.